Madam Chair, and thank you to the gentlemen who are our witnesses today. I wanted to follow up on the whole question of data, and we've heard from you, Monsieur Richard, that in fact enforcement is not voluntary, that you speak about the industry players adhering as a whole to the rules, conditions. Do you have any data to support that? Because this data piece is really important. The study suggested, let me finish. The study suggested that there was issues. The N is small, and that's appreciated. But what data do you have to suggest otherwise? And the second question, just quickly, I'll throw in there, is do you have any numbers around what percentage, what proportion of members of your industry are actually being inspected of the whole, of the total?
I don't know if the committee has been briefed by ESDC and Service Canada. I seem to have an echo here. Certainly, those departments would be in a position to give you very precise numbers on the number of inspections, what triggers inspections. I think sometimes they can be, I think they have a regular program. Even employers that have an absolutely pristine compliance records will get audited on a regular basis. As I mentioned, when they do on-site visits, it can last 2 days. They will interview confidentially at least a minimum of 15 workers. They look at payroll records if there's any issues around that. They look at compliance with employment standards. They can visit housing. It's a very robust and stringent process, and rightly so. It should be that way. And as I mentioned, the federal government has expanded these protections last year.
Yeah, Nat. I was just gonna comment that I agree with Nat, and I would suggest that you contact Service Canada, because they would have that information, because I know when we had that negative report 2 years ago around treatment of temporary foreign workers and handling questions, I had a lot of my members call me. They were so upset. They said, where is this coming from? And dealing with the press, we don't have access to that information. And I often felt, gosh, I wish maybe if Service Canada or somebody could make an announcement saying, yes, there have been inspections, and this is what they found. So again, I found that very frustrating back then. So I would suggest, yes, the data is there, but we don't have it. And I think my colleagues would agree that we don't have anything to do in the enforcement area. We can't penalize
Let's follow up with
members.
A quick question then, because this is your impression, and so I'm happy to take impressions. Is there any room for improvement in your view on the conditions that temporary foreign workers are being exposed to in the industries that you represent? Your impression.
My impression would be is that I think that there's always room for improvement. There are, like I said before, there are a lot of good news stories out there, but I can't speak for every temporary foreign worker that's in housing. And I always say to my members, if there's any bad actors out there or whatever, that's got to be addressed. Let's get more inspections done if that's what's needed, and make those improvements. But I can tell you that I've seen some of the housing for some of my members, and it's very good. So, but again, there's always room for improvement. Temporary foreign workers, you're hearing that loud and clear from my colleagues. They are key to the survival of our industry, and not just not the processors and people in the plants. It's the harvesters. It's the fishers that out there. They depend on us. And it's not easy. Nobody's talked about this, but you only have
thank you, sir. We're coming to the end of our time. I apologize to you and to my colleagues. I will make a general observation, though. Yesterday we heard from the Fisheries Council of Canada, and again we noted that the councils and the associations themselves are not collecting evidence. Maybe it is lack of capacity. I don't know. But if temporary foreign workers are so essential to the future of your industry, perhaps data would help us and you a great deal. Colleagues, we will suspend for a few minutes. Senator Moody.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Guillen, I just want to assure you that your dream of a life with dignity, without fear, and without abuse is one that we support. Thank you for your bravery and your eloquent description of the abuses that you met, and your testimony is profoundly disturbing. But I need to dig more, and my apologies for that. So I'll offer the other two members, Mr. Rao, if you could also contribute an answer, that would be great. We will be on a fact-finding visit, looking for areas where we can uncover some of these abuses, particularly around agencies where individuals may be expected to be receiving support that they're not, or where they may be putting in reports, submitting reports, or raising concerns. Where should we be looking and focusing to learn more about the prevailing number of cases, the details of these cases, the outcomes of these cases, so that we can have a more of a first-hand understanding of how the system that's supposedly in place to support workers is not working for them.
To start with Mr. McCrae.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. I would probably recommend just engaging with the community organizations that are involved in this work. Addie did mention that there are some groups that have been receiving funding. Now, he did also begin to mention some of the difficulties with that funding, and I just wanted to kind of continue that conversation. Most of the funding that organizations like ours have received is on project-based, and a lot of times there are pilot programs. The current one is only for 1 year, and it's difficult to kind of plan long-term to do this work whenever we only have short-term funding. And the funding is pretty meager. It's attached to numbers that were used from kind of questionable sources on work permits that were issued in previous years. And we know that the uptick in the use of the program is increasing significantly. And I think it's also important to think about, like, we see settlement agencies that are over capacity, right? And they have a significant amount of employees and resources, and it's needed. It's very much needed. But I think it's also important to look at folks that are working specifically with the populations that we are. We're incredibly underfunded. You're kind of looking at two organizations of the very few in the Atlantic region that are doing this work. And we've seen over the last decade, there's been more people entering this country with temporary status than folks coming through with access to permanent residency. So I would encourage engaging with us. If you're looking to visit employers to do inspections, like I think you should do that. I would also like to recommend, just really quickly, that on the note of inspections, one thing that we have seen is that oftentimes when ESDC or other groups, environmental health groups, go to do inspections, we typically do see that the employer is kind of hand selecting workers who will be kind of doing these interviews. So that is something to be considered if you're looking at doing those inspections, and just to have that noted.
Much.